He had long since stopped naming the stars he burned. It felt impolite after the first few dozen. The galaxy before him unfolded like a wounded map, dotted with the last resistance of an empire that had mistaken size for immortality. Beneath him, his dragon exhaled a slow, irritated breath, embers slipping between its teeth. "You know," the dragon muttered, its voice vibrating through his bones, "if they surrender now, I might forgive them." "You said that about the last empire," he replied, tightening his grip on the reins. "Yes," the dragon said thoughtfully, "and they didn't. I still feel justified." Ahead, fleets of alien warships assembled in a trembling line, their formation precise, but their fear poorly concealed. He could see it even from this distance, the hesitation, the flicker of doubt. They had heard the stories, a man, a dragon, entire systems reduced to quiet ash. He almost felt bad for them, almost. A beam of searing light shot past them, missing by a margin so wide it felt like an apology. "That was insulting," the dragon said. "I've had hatchlings aim better." He allowed himself a brief smile. "Maybe they're nervous." "They should be," the dragon replied. "I am." "You?" he asked, surprised. "I'm nervous I'll run out of things to burn before lunch." Before he could respond, the void shifted. Not violently, not dramatically, just a subtle wrongness, like a thought half forgotten. The next volley of enemy fire slowed mid-flight, its lethal brilliance dimming into harmless sparks. One by one, the weapons failed, systems flickering into silence as if embarrassed by their own existence. "What did you do?" he asked. "I didn't do anything," the dragon said, for once. Then he saw her. She stood in the empty space between fleets, as if standing on solid ground, her presence bending the dark around her into something almost gentle. At first glance, she was human. Then she turned slightly, and the long curve of her ears caught the distant starlight, marking her as something else entirely. The enemy ships hesitated. So did he. She raised a hand, examining the drifting fragments of energy with mild curiosity. "These are loud," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the vacuum. "I don't like loud things." The remnants of the attack vanished completely. The dragon leaned its massive head closer to him. "I didn't do that either," it whispered. Just to be clear, he guided the dragon forward, cautious but unable to resist the pull of something he couldn't name. As they approached, the fleets behind her began to collapse, not explode, not retreat, but simply stop. Engines died, weapons powered down, entire ships drifted like forgotten toys. She looked at him then, and for a moment the endless wars, the burning galaxies, all of it seemed to pause. "You're late," she said. He blinked. "Late for what?" She tilted her head slightly, as if the answer were obvious. "For this." Behind her, a distant star flickered and rewound, its brief collapse undone as though time itself had reconsidered. The dragon let out a low whistle. "Oh, I like her," it said. "She fixes things by breaking them differently." He dismounted slowly, stepping onto nothing and finding, somehow, that it held. His instincts screamed at him, but curiosity pushed him forward. "You stopped an entire fleet," he said. "Why?" She considered the question, her expression thoughtful. "Because you were about to destroy them," she answered simply. "That's usually how this goes." "I know," she said, a faint smile forming. "It's repetitive." The dragon snorted behind him. "Finally, someone says it." He studied her, searching for weakness, for limits, for anything that made sense. He found none. "Who are you?" he asked. She stepped closer, the space between them folding in a way that made distance feel irrelevant. "I'm someone who got bored," she said lightly. "And then I saw you." He frowned. "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." Behind them, one of the drifting alien ships suddenly reactivated, its weapons charging in a desperate, foolish attempt. He barely had time to react. She sighed. The ship turned into a cloud of harmless light, rearranging itself into something resembling a floating chair. She sat on it. "There," she said, satisfied. "Much better." The dragon chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "If she starts redecorating galaxies, I'm officially retiring." He didn't laugh this time. He was too busy realizing that for the first time in countless wars, he had no idea what would happen next. He did not trust silence, especially the kind that followed something impossible. The fleet still drifted like stunned insects, their war forgotten mid-thought, and she remained seated on her absurd throne of rearranged light as if she had always belonged there. He circled her slowly, not out of caution. He had long abandoned that luxury, but out of habit. "You stopped a war," he said, just like that. She shrugged slightly. It was a dull one. The dragon lowered its massive head beside him, eyes narrowing with interest. Do you always interrupt battles you find boring? Yes, she replied without hesitation. Sometimes I replace them with better ones. He frowned. Define better. She tapped her chin, thinking. Less screaming, more creativity. Once I made 2 armies compete in a cooking contest. The dragon perked up. Did I get invited? You ate the judges, she said. The dragon paused. That does sound like me. He exhaled slowly, trying to anchor himself in something logical, something real. You can't just rewrite events because you feel like it. She looked at him with a softness that felt dangerously close to amusement. I don't do it because I feel like it, she said. I do it because I can. That's worse. Behind them, one of the alien commanders finally regained enough courage or desperation to act. A transmission burst through the silence, filled with frantic, untranslated sounds. The ship attempted to charge its weapons again. He turned instinctively, hand reaching for his blade. She didn't even look. The ship froze mid-motion, then gently rotated until it faced away from them, its weapons dismantling themselves piece by piece like a child losing interest in a toy. There, she said, they're leaving. They're not leaving, he said, watching the fleet drift aimlessly. They're confused. Confusion is the first step to leaving, she replied. The dragon chuckled. I usually skip straight to burning, but this is educational. He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. You're interfering with things you don't understand. She leaned forward slightly, her long ears catching a faint glimmer from a distant star. I understand you, she said. That's unlikely. You fight because it's the only thing that makes sense anymore, she continued calmly. You keep going because stopping would mean remembering. The words hit harder than any weapon he had faced. He stiffened, his expression hardening. You don't know anything about me. She smiled faintly. I know you didn't name the last 100 stars you destroyed. He blinked, caught off guard. The dragon snorted. I told you that was weird. I didn't tell anyone that, he muttered. She stood then, the constructed chair dissolving beneath her as if it had never existed. The space around them seemed to adjust, as though reality itself was making room for her to move. You don't have to keep doing this, she said. Yes, I do. No, she replied gently. You've just never seen an alternative. Before he could argue, the dragon suddenly tensed beneath him, its wings shifting slightly. Something's coming, it growled. This time, the shift in space was violent. A tear split open in the distance, jagged and unstable, spilling out a swarm of angular, unfamiliar ships, far more aggressive, far less hesitant. Their presence felt wrong, like a mistake the universe hadn't corrected yet. Oh, she said, watching them with mild interest. These are new. The dragon grinned, flames flickering between its teeth. Finally, something worth burning. The incoming fleet didn't hesitate. Weapons ignited instantly, a storm of energy surging toward them. He moved without thinking, leaping onto the dragon's back as it roared and surged forward to meet the attack. For a brief moment, it felt familiar again, battle, fire, motion. Then everything stopped, not slowed, not weakened, stopped. The entire assault hung frozen in space, a deadly sculpture suspended in time. He turned to her sharply. Don't. She raised an eyebrow. Don't what? Don't end this before it starts. She studied him for a moment, then smiled in a way that felt both kind and deeply dangerous. Fine, she said, but try to make it interesting. Time snapped back into motion. The dragon roared with delight as it plunged into the chaos, and he felt something he hadn't in a long time, not just purpose, but anticipation. Behind them, she watched quietly, her gaze steady, as if measuring something far beyond the battle itself. Let's see, she murmured softly. If you can surprise me. The wars finally ebbed, not because the enemies were defeated, but because the universe itself seemed to sigh and give them leave. The dragon stretched its wings across the void, basking in the calm like an old general exhausted by decades of insubordination. I can retire now, it muttered, and he almost believed it. He almost believed it until a ripple of movement across the stars reminded him that nothing in the cosmos remained quiet for long. She hovered beside him, her long ears brushing the faint glow of distant nebulae, watching him with a gaze that had once bent reality around him with a mere thought. You look less stressed, she said, tilting her head. Almost like you don't need to burn everything in sight to feel alive. He chuckled, a a low sound that surprised him more than it did her. "I don't know if that's good or bad." "Probably good," she replied, smiling faintly. "I'm here, aren't I?" He looked at her, at the calm radiance she carried, and felt the odd sensation of realization. The kind that comes when you see a map of the stars and understand for the first time which paths are yours to choose. "You've changed everything," he said. "Not just the battles, me too." She reached out, her fingers brushing the scale of the dragon lightly. "I didn't change you. You always had it. I just pointed it in a more interesting direction." He laughed then, a short bark that startled even the dragon. "Pointed it? That sounds like an insult." "Perspective," she said, amused. "Your dragon appreciates the humor, yes." The dragon snorted, flames curling lazily from its nostrils. "I do, and I approve, mostly because you're no longer burning entire planets over paperwork mistakes." He glanced at the empty fields of space where countless fleets had once assembled, the echoes of war now replaced with a quiet, almost reverent. "I suppose there's more to life than fighting," he admitted, and the words felt heavy but honest. She nodded, her long ears catching stray starlight like delicate antennas. "There's more to life than victory. There's creation." Creation. The word lingered, tangible, as if the universe itself leaned closer to hear. And that creation was already forming. He felt it first as a subtle warmth, a hum in the void that grew stronger, then pulsed through his bones. She placed a hand on her abdomen, serene and confident, and he understood before he even spoke. "You mean?" "Yes," she said softly, a smile touching her lips. "They're coming, our children, not just human or dragon, but something entirely new, something the cosmos hasn't seen before." The dragon growled, but it was something between amusement and reluctant awe. "I've been around a long time. I've seen empires rise and collapse, suns flare and die, but I haven't seen this." The first offspring emerged like sparks in the void, shifting between light and scale, their eyes carrying the certainty of their mother and the fire of their father. They stumbled, argued, breathed fire with reckless abandon, and once accidentally realigned a minor constellation while playing tag. He laughed, the sound echoing across the empty reaches of space. "They'll break things," he said, watching them, "and probably remake them in ways I can't imagine." "They will," she replied, "and you'll see why it's worth it." He reached out, touching her hand, and felt the quiet promise of a new beginning. "I thought conquest was everything," he said, "but maybe it's just preparation." "For this," she said, "for all of this." The dragon rumbled beside them, wings folding like a contented guardian. "At least someone's finally having fun." He looked at her, at their children, at the stars stretched endlessly before them, and felt a rare, unshakable peace. The warrior who had burned countless galaxies had learned, at last, to protect instead of destroy, to build instead of conquer, to love instead of fear. And as the offspring soared into the vast expanse, trailing sparks of light and fire, he realized the true victory was never in the stars he had taken, but in the new life they had created together. A life that would one day surpass even the most blazing of his battles, shaping the cosmos in ways he could only begin to imagine. The dragon exhaled a long, satisfied sigh. Finally, some real entertainment. He laughed again, and this time, the sound carried a weightless joy, as if the universe itself had been holding its breath and was finally free to smile. Time moved differently now, stretching and folding like silk across the edges of the galaxies he once conquered. He perched atop the dragon, feeling the hum of the cosmos beneath scales that had borne him through wars older than most planets. Beside him, she floated effortlessly, her long ears catching stray starlight and folding it into soft arcs that seemed almost like laughter frozen in motion. Their children darted between constellations, weaving light and fire into intricate patterns that left the remnants of old empires blinking in awe. He smiled, a slow, thoughtful curve of lips. "I never imagined it would end like this," he said, his voice barely louder than the hum of the void. She tilted her head, her expression teasing yet serene. "And this is only the beginning. I've been telling you that for years." He glanced at the dragon, who had curled its massive body into a loose spiral around a drifting asteroid. "And I kept ignoring you," he admitted. "You kept setting the pace," she said lightly. "I just followed the fireworks." The dragon snorted, sparks curling from its nostrils. "And you did make them spectacular. But I have to admit, watching them build life instead of burn it is oddly satisfying." He laughed at that, the sound echoing across the endless void. It wasn't the laughter of someone who had survived wars. It was the laughter of someone who had learned to live after them. He looked down at the drifting remnants of the last alien fleets, all now disarmed, reorganized, or entirely converted into floating gardens of luminescent plants. "You really have a strange way of solving problems," he said. "I call it perspective," she replied. "You call it dangerous. Either way it works." A ripple of energy pulsed across the horizon as their children, a mix of dragon, light, and something utterly new, executed a playful chase that reshaped minor star systems with each tumble. He watched them, their unbridled curiosity and power reminding him painfully of himself at their age, reckless, burning, eager to prove a place in the cosmos. Only now, guided by her, guided by them, he understood restraint, not from fear, but from love and foresight. "Do you remember," he said softly, "how I used to think conquest was everything?" She smiled, touching his hand lightly. "Yes, you used to name the stars you destroyed. I told you it was unhealthy." He chuckled. "I suppose you were right." "And now," he said, gesturing at their children weaving constellations like threads of light, "I name the stars we create together." The dragon rumbled, a low, approving vibration. "I like this version better. No explosions, just artistry." He leaned toward her, and for the first time, he felt the fullness of peace that had always eluded him in the endless blaze of war. She rested her hand against his chest, her calm confidence anchoring him in ways fire and steel never could. Their children gathered, circling them like living satellites, and he realized the depth of what had been accomplished. They were not just a family, they were a legacy, a new race capable of bending stars and shaping futures. Their existence resolved old grievances, healed wounds he hadn't known he carried, and reminded him that power without guidance was chaos, but love with purpose could become creation. The galaxy itself seemed to lean closer, shimmering under the gentle authority of their combined presence. Even the distant suns flickered as if acknowledging a new order, one not dictated by fear or fire, but by the unyielding spark of imagination and care. He looked at her, at the dragon, at the children weaving through the constellations, and felt a profound clarity. "I came here thinking I was the master of everything," he said, "but I was only learning how to serve something greater." She smiled, eyes reflecting nebulae and starlight. "And now you do." The dragon exhaled a long, contented sigh, curling around them protectively. "All right," it rumbled. "Let's see how far we can push this new cosmos. I've been patient long enough." He laughed, and for the first time it was pure, unrestrained. A sound that carried not just through the void, but into the hearts of every star, every planet, every corner of space they had touched. The journey that began with fire and conquest had ended in creation, laughter, and family, leaving behind a cosmos reshaped not by fear, but by a warrior who had learned to wield his strength with care, and by a woman who had rewritten reality, not for power, but for love. And as their children spiraled outward, trailing sparks of light and potential, he knew the universe had never been in safer, more capable hands. The stars shone a little brighter that day, not as trophies, but as witnesses to the true legacy of a man who had conquered galaxies and discovered the joy of creation.